afternoon. I'm here in Hadley Wood, not my usual Highgate Wood, and today I'm here with my very good friend and fellow trader, Mr. Chris Markiewicz. And hello, Chris. Now, just before we start, I have to tell you the reason that he looks smaller than I do is not because I'm trying to psych him out or anything, but he had the foresight to bring a chair and I'm sitting on a bench, so we're at different levels. Nonetheless, we're both very happy to be here. Chris invited me here to Hadley Wood so we can have a little chat about, like you own it.
On a drizzly day.
I'm making out like you own Hadley Wood.
My empire.
Your empire. Well, it's different for
my
me.
Estate.
Yeah, people can't see our muddy boots, which is good. And so we tramped through here and we found this opening with a bench. So we're here in our open air office to talk about things leadership. Chris is also a trainer, and to talk about, well, kindness at work was really the thing that we felt we both had in common, didn't we? But interesting.
And I find you very kind. Even at work.
This is the level this is going to be. But what was interesting when we had our preliminary chat was you said that when you're training, that's very much the kind of focus you have, but you never use the word kindness.
Yeah, I think the essence of what you share and talk about is very much about that, and about the idea of being kind. The only reason I don't use the word kindness at the present time is that it's not to be confused with being too soft or too compliant when managing people, because of course it is very much about a balance between that aspect of treating people with dignity and respect, along with obviously getting the job done.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I agree. I have a problem with the word, with the fact. I have a problem with the fact that the expression, the word kindness, is seen as a metaphor for, or a simile for, a bit wishy-washy, a bit soft around the edges. And I kind of one of the things I'd love to do is to bring it into the currency, to almost bring it out into the open.
Yes.
And for somebody to say, do you know my manager, my line manager, my lead, they're such a kind person, as if that's a really good thing, because it is a good thing.
It is a good thing, without a doubt. Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel that a lot of companies feel like, as you said, that people think, oh, kindness is a bit wishy-washy and so on. But at the same time, they want people to be better, to be happier workers, to be more productive workers. So how are they going to strike that balance if they don't want to be overtly saying, oh, we're kind people?
Yes.
Because I think I would put that on an ad. I would put that on an advert if I was hiring somebody. With our office promotes kindness, tolerance. All those lovely words. Yes.
And I noticed the link you made a second ago when you said happier and more productive people. How that really is almost like I always have trouble saying this word, Mel. Inextricable link between happy employees, if you will, and people who are productive.
Yeah.
And when we talk about productive, you can have people who are who do the bare minimum they can get away with in terms of actually getting things done, because they're not that happy, they're not that motivated, or the distinction between that and being genuinely fulfilled in the workplace and therefore giving it their all. And I think kindness is an aspect that will definitely feed into that. Yeah, certainly.
Definitely. I agree with that. But who is then responsible? Because another contention I have is that in a sense we're all leaders, even though somebody is a manager, their job title is manager, and that we're all leaders in the sense that it's all it's down to all of us to lead on that. And I think in the last video I talked about how one of the last videos about how my friend's boss had said to her, well, why should I say thank you to you? Nobody ever says thank you to me. Well, who's going to be the first person to do the thank youing? Who's responsible for the kindness or the atmosphere in the workplace?
Absolutely. And one of the things I talk about, which I actually picked up from a colleague of mine a few years ago, was something that's known as the emotional bank account. And this is quite an interesting concept. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a little bit like every time a manager or a leader says something supportive, something motivating, something positive to the member of their team. It's like a deposit into that emotional bank account.
Right.
Every time they say something that is, shall we say, demotivating, or something that is critical or judgmental about an individual in a negative way, that would be a withdrawal from that emotional bank account. The idea being that your bank account, as with any bank account, needs to remain in the black. And what can happen a lot of the time is, sadly, in a lot of organisations and departments, it can be that a lot of managers might be in the red in their emotional bank account, and thereby have a team who are demotivated, therefore not performing to their maximum ability and potential. And that obviously has an impact on the bottom line, which is what ultimately it's all got to be about. It's not just about being kind, it's
Absolutely.
about getting it done.
We have to deliver, we have to deliver whatever the goals are that our company or organisation has asked us to deliver on.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of companies do understand this whole idea that if people are happier and you're nicer, that's another word everybody hates, nice, to people, then they will work better. But I think that a lot of companies just haven't kind of got it right in how to do that. And I think they're struggling to kind of get that balance right. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And of course, I do encounter this a lot in my work. And I think it's very much about those individual managers, not just for the likes of us to say, okay, that manager isn't doing things right, or that manager is, shall we say, too autocratic or whatever, but also to step back and kind of understand why that may be the case. So when I was a manager myself many years ago, I realized some of my management style was pretty autocratic, sometimes bordering on the bullying, and recognizing that actually underneath that, or underpinning that, was a very strong sense of uncertainty, insecurity, lack of confidence.
Yeah.
And I think what an awful lot of managers do, they will kind of compensate or overcompensate for that by being autocratic, by being quite directive in their approach and in their style. And as a result, that kind part of themselves, which may well exist, outside of people who are out and out, let's say, sociopaths or psychopathic managers, which you also get, it doesn't have an opportunity to shine through. So I think a lot of it is about how those managers actually feel in themselves, and how that can be changed and built on.
I think that's absolutely right, and it's that insecurity comes from a whole load of things, which isn't necessarily to do with work, but they're bringing that bag and baggage to work with them, and they're finding that this is a place that they can play that out in a way that they wouldn't do at home with their wives, their husbands, their children. People don't do. So why do that at work? And I think it's part of, certainly in part of the leadership training I'm doing is it's about thinking about what you stand for, the values, and getting to the heart of those, and understanding that if you play those out in the workplace, you don't have to be autocratic. People think management and leadership is telling people what to do.
Yes.
And there are certain kinds of people who feel insecure about themselves who like the idea of that.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely, because it gives them a sense of power and so on. And interesting also, when you talk about values, working with teams, any manager or leader, that they get a sense of what the values are of each individual member of their team, so that they become, shall we say, intrinsically motivated to do the job rather than extrinsically motivated. So the less, shall we say, sophisticated manager may use reward and punishment in order to so-called motivate people, rather than looking at what underlies or what is likely to truly motivate someone from the inside out, and looking for those intrinsic motivators.
Right.
So there's a number of things here really in terms of those elements that make that superbly well-rounded manager, such as we've been talking about, that sort of disconnect between that insecurity and what comes out in terms of the management behaviours, that manager having a better understanding of what's important to their people, what drives them, what motivates them as individuals. Something I often say on courses, how well do you know each member of your team? You know them perhaps at an operational level, at a functional level, but do you know them as individuals, as people, and what's really important to them? And I think that kind of feeds into that kindness piece, if you like.
It does, but what's also interesting, and I've worked in atmospheres like this, where I know if I've got a manager, a leader, a team leader, who is that kind of autocratic, bullying person, and we've all been there, we've all had them. My instinct is not to show the real me, because then that makes you vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Because I have seen it in management. I've seen team leaders who look for the things that who look for the weakness so they can have a go at you.
Yeah.
And I've actually had it said to me. I remember once, a long time ago, saying to a manager, but the thing about me is, and then describing how I feel in a particular situation, and then sometime later having that thrown back at me as if they'd thought of it first. And it was almost like, he knew what button to press, and then threw it back at me. He's like, the thing about you, Mel, is you do this, this, and this. I was like, and I didn't want to say, well, I told you that myself. And he may not have remembered that I told him. So in a sense, you hold back and you don't want to show your real self, because the real bit of you is the bit that you can hold back and keep to yourself and doesn't get tainted almost.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
It does, and indeed that would apply to an awful lot of managers as well. I mean, I can't even count on the fingers of one hand an experience of a manager saying, I'm feeling scared, or I'm feeling insecure, or I'm feeling worried. It just doesn't come into the corporate vocabulary. And of course, instead of that, what they do is, as I say, they're much more likely to overcompensate for that with these kind of unintegrated, shall we say, behaviours that do affect the relationship and the person's motivation and so on. And a person's performance is going to be a reflection of that manager.
Definitely.
I remember another colleague of mine, associate of mine, saying some years ago, quoting a manager of his who used to say, if you're managing people, use a mirror, not a microscope. So, in other words, the performance of your team is going to be a direct reflection of how you manage them and how you are with them, and the kindness, again, that comes into that. I kind of like to call it a sort of a practical compassion, that you're compassionate, but also getting the job done.
Yeah, that's a lovely phrase.
And the kindness element coming into that compassionate side.
That's a lovely phrase, practical compassion. I'm going to steal that now.
Steal whatever you like. Nothing new under the sun.
And the emotional background.
There's no sun today.
New ideas. But that's really, because you were talking about managers not saying, I'm scared, I'm worried about this. Because the thing is, even if you're at the most senior level, you get, it can get too much for you. It can get too much for you. I don't know if you saw today, there was a little video from the head of Lloyds Bank talking about how he had all these worries and he couldn't share them, so he lost sleep and so on. And he ended up having 8 weeks off work with stress. This is a CEO of one of the biggest banking groups. What an amazing thing that he's able to talk about that, because I think being able to show your vulnerability is not a weakness, it is a strength. Because as managers, I think sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking we have all the good ideas, nobody else knows all the good ideas, but actually your team can help you. So I think the thing is open it out and say, guys, I'm really worried about this is quite frightening, I need your help. So showing vulnerability, because if you show vulnerability, then other people feel they can as well.
They feel more safe, absolutely.
Rather than trying to wade their way through things, make a mess of it. Everybody gets angry. Why didn't you do this way? This has gone wrong. And then you just end up in this sort of mass of toxicity that somebody's got to change. And
absolutely.
I think the team leader is responsible, but I think we can all hopefully make a contribution. Do you think? I don't know.
Absolutely. And in fact, interesting you use the word toxicity, because when I go into organisations, which I have been doing for some years now, I can usually kind of get a sense of a toxicity level. I sometimes call it the TQ. We've heard of IQ, we've heard of EQ, emotional quotient. I call it the toxicity quotient. And the little measures of things like if I'm walking down a corridor and people scuttle past me with their heads down and don't engage, that gives it kind of a high toxicity quotient within an organisation. If on the other hand I'm walking along a corridor and someone meets, sort of makes eye contact, says good morning, and there's a spring in their step, I think, low toxicity quotient. And they're the companies that I invest in, and this is what's led to my investment portfolio, which is now worth several tens of millions, off the back of just seeing how happy people are at work. And
it's not true, but it should be true.
Whilst that last bit was a joke, I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
That the more people are respected, are treated with respect and dignity in the workplace, are on the receiving end of kindness, of compassion, and so on and so forth, then they're going to do a better job, and the organisation is going to fire on all cylinders. And yes, the shareholders, which so many organisations are having to answer to, make a nice wedge every 6 months or whatever as a result.
Like Chris, you're many millions in the bank. Yeah,
I wish.
Yeah, I know.
But it's a theory I should try out one day and
but
see
it is,
if it holds out.
Wouldn't that be interesting if we as investors, those of us who have money to invest, some of you may have money to invest, actually chose where to put our money based on the happiness quotient. If we're going to have a TQ, let's have an HQ.
Yep.
The happiness quotient.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Or kindness quotient. The KQ.
We can have all these. If we had all those measures,
yes.
and we could understand that there would be companies that I think people wouldn't invest in because we know, because we keep reading it in the business pages of the undercover reporter goes and sees how miserable X company. I'm not naming names, but you know what I mean. And people wouldn't invest in those, so that would be quite interesting.
It certainly would. I think it might be about hanging around outside the back door with the smokers, and if their conversations are very upbeat, you kind of know, oh, right, okay, this company could be doing well. If their conversation is downbeat and miserable and whingy, we hear it on the tube all the time, or at least I do, then we kind of know that that's one probably to avoid. Yeah,
is it because you can, I mean, I don't know if you've come across the website glassdoor.com.
Yes, I've heard of it, yes.
And people can write their appraisals of their current or previous employers. I think that's interesting, and I look at it because I look at the things that people say about, and I come from a publishing background, I look at things people say about publishers. Of course, the danger with that is that people who are unhappy are the most likely. When people are happy, it should be a natural state. We shouldn't have to talk about it. So I think, for me, I think if a company comes up on Glassdoor quite a lot, that probably does mean actually that people are a little bit unhappy. Exactly. One of my favourite entries was, and I've often talked about this in my Edinburgh show and other things I do about rewards for one publisher. You have to fill in, the rewards you get, and somebody put, we get free books, and I was like, that's not really a reward, is it? Because that's the minimum, because a paperback book doesn't cost very much to a publisher. So it's rewards aren't about those things, are they? About the things they give you. It's about what they create to enable you to, I think, do your job well.
And how you're treated on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
If I may, there's a lovely story, again, another story that I heard from a colleague, because I love to pick up ideas from other people. He worked for one of the big banks, I think it was HSBC, and there was a particular manager there that he worked with who, when he arrived in the morning, he'd come out of the lift, and just to the right of the lift was his office. But what he'd do is he'd come out of the lift and he'd turn left, and he would actually walk around the whole office and engage with people as he walked around. He'd say, good morning, how you doing? Maybe take 10, 15 minutes to go around the office, maybe stop off to grab a coffee, have a quick chat in the kitchen with one or two people, and then eventually end up in his office where he would sort of continue with his work and so on. That particular manager moved on, probably promoted or went to another organisation, and my colleague said that a new manager came in, and of course, quite logically, he'd come out of a lift every morning, go into his office, and wouldn't be seen all day. And John, my colleague, said that within a couple of weeks, the whole atmosphere, the whole feel of the office had completely shifted, completely changed. Now, this person wasn't unkind per se, this person wasn't malevolent, but they didn't have that kind of magic quality of just being able to put those tiny deposits in his emotional bank account. £10 here, £20 there, in terms of just saying good morning to people, how you doing, how is family, blah, blah, blah. So that people felt like they were treated as individuals and thereby motivated as a result.
It's really interesting you talk about magic quality, because I think there are some people for whom that kind of leadership is just natural. They just understand what motivates people and they care. For people who aren't natural, I think you can learn it.
It can be developed.
There are strategies we can put in place, and that's what we do as trainers. Put strategies in place and give people tools to understand, because a lot of it is just not understanding and not realising. And I've done that as a manager in the past, in my early days of management, upset somebody by doing this thing and not doing that thing, and then not realising the impact that has on people. I held my hand up to that. But you can develop those skills, but it's a rare person who totally gets that. And there is somebody told me once about a management theory or management practice which is known as quote unquote management by walking about.
Ah, yes. Tom Peters was the man
was
who
it
came
Tom
up with that back in the
Peters?
70s, I think it was, yes.
Yeah, so just walking around, just seeing what's going on.
Absolutely.
And you learn as well, don't you,
Yes.
as a manager? It's not just about you saying to people, oh, you're stuck with that, I'll help you. It's about you learning about what's going on as well.
Which is very different to micromanagement, because of course that can be misinterpreted as kind of invasive, kind of micro, but it's taking that general interest. Very, very much so, and as a result, people feel cared for, feel nurtured, and are much likely to perform a lot more effectively.
And you're asking different questions, aren't you, when you're managing by walking around? You're asking open questions, not that, have you finished this, do that, do that. You know, you're not telling, you're asking open questions that's general, how's it all going, how's progress? So really just sort of, you know, how are the kids, whatever, you know, and actually meaning it.
Yes.
Because I don't know, we've all been in those offices where everybody goes through, how was your weekend? How was your weekend? And I just want to put a sign up on my desk going, my weekend was fine, leave me alone. Because
it's like a small talk thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a small talk automatic thing.
Yeah.
But at the same, but you know, a little bit of sincerity, I think.
Absolutely. The other thing, just briefly, is that quite often managers will become managers having come through a different discipline. So they may have been the top salesperson, or they may have been technically very proficient, and therefore and become promoted. And for the first time, it can be in their career, they have to deal with those weird and wonderful things called human beings, and they're just lost with it. So what they can do is kind of retreat back into their task-focused activities. And getting on with that, rather than building those relationships and having those regular one-to-ones with each member of their staff, that kind of thing, which can really be worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely, because you have to learn, and I guess to some degree you're talking there about the Peter Principle, where people are elevated, you know, because they're very good at task X, and they're elevated to managing people who do task X, and they don't know how to do it.
Absolutely.
You can get past the Peter Principle by understanding that that's where you are, and then learning some of these techniques, to get involved and to be, as you say, not so task focused. You reminded me of something that happened to me. I had a manager. I came in, and he had exited the job I came in to do.
Yes.
Oh my God, I couldn't get him out of my office sometimes. I go, what's happening with this? And such a buddy emailed me because they didn't realise I'd moved on. But don't worry, I've sorted it. Why did you? So now I don't know how to sort that thing because you sorted it for me. And it was like, stop doing my job. I'm going to meet these clients. I'll come with you. I need to introduce you. I've just introduced myself over the phone. Don't need you to come. At one point, coming to New York with me to introduce me to. I don't need you to introduce people. It wasn't. I think it was just that he loved doing that job.
Yeah, absolutely.
And was clearly good at it, and couldn't, even though he'd now been elevated to quite a high level, couldn't quite let go.
Absolutely.
I found it very frustrating.
Yeah.
But anyway, he moved on, and that opened things up for me. But oh my goodness, it was frustrating, and I understood it, but it didn't make it any less frustrating.
Yeah.
But you have to. It's self-awareness, isn't it? It's
self-awareness. Which is an integral part of the whole area of emotional intelligence, if you like, self-awareness, awareness of others, and so on, and the impact that we have, especially as managers, on people. And indeed, what you were just telling me about there reminded me of what is probably my favourite definition of management, of being a manager. And it's just 3 words, and that is getting things done. And of course, a lot of managers or people move into a management role, and they're not getting things done, they're still doing things.
Doing it themselves.
Rather than getting things done through their people, delegating, identifying where people's strengths are, where people's motivations are, allocating tasks accordingly, and so on, and then getting on with other shall we say, management type activities, rather than hanging on to those roles that they feel most comfortable with, which can be a natural inclination. So on the one hand, they want to carry on doing what they did in their previous role, and also have the benefits, if you like, financial and otherwise, of having a management role and the status and so on.
You can't have it both ways. And one of the things I like to do if I come into a new management role is, especially if it's a team I don't know, is I'll talk to everybody and do what I call a skills audit. I find out what everybody can do really well, and also what people like doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe there's if we can move this person to the left or to the right, and give them more of a focus on that task. rather than, oh, well, you two have got the same job title, so you should be doing the same things. I don't think that kind of works. You should kind of get what floats people's boats, what they like doing, and what they're good at doing.
Yes.
And it might mean making some changes, but if you make some happy people out of that, I mean, one of the things I always do if I go to a new role is always, especially with marketing, was who's good at social media, because I'm really bad at social media. And you always find somebody who really loves doing it.
Absolutely.
And then okay, well, if you're good at it and you like doing it and you understand it, I'm going to, you know, make this more of a focus of your job. And I feel like that you know, that works for them, because they feel like they're bringing something that I haven't got. And also as a manager, I always think, rather than hiring people like me and who have the same skills as me, I always look at the gaps in my own knowledge and think, if I can plug them with somebody else, that always helps me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that everything kind of falls into place. And there are various theories around about having different kinds of typical roles within teams, team roles, if you like, that kind of do address this. And also recognizing that how I am as a manager isn't going to be how somebody else is, and other people may have different expectations to those that I might have. And to recognise that also is really, really important. It makes for a nicely and well-balanced team, so that things do get done. But, you know, obviously with that, as you say, that kindness thrown in, that practical compassion.
Absolutely. I'm going to use that phrase more and more, I think, practical compassion. But it's such a good phrase.
I only thought of it yesterday.
No, it's great.
And I've been doing this stuff nearly 30 years.
He thought
It took me 30 years to get there, folks.
I'm stealing it today. But practical compassion, it's absolutely different. That's you've got to write the book now.
Oh, Christ.
You've got to write the book. He's going to write the book. If he doesn't, I will. But practical compassion, it's so important. So, yeah, we're going to get the things done. We're going to take care of you. We're going to take care of you in a way that enables you to do your job well. So you walk around, you feel, I'm satisfied. I've done the job I'm supposed to do, and I'm happy doing it. And I want to come back tomorrow and do a bit more of it.
Lovely,
because sometimes, I mean, we've all done that. Anybody here who suffered from Sunday dread, you know, when you get a Sunday night, you think, oh, I can't do this.
And it's such a breath of fresh air sometimes in the training room, somebody declares how much they love their job. You know, so it happens and it can be done.
But you hear it so little. And you know the statistic that I've been bandying around for years since I started doing the Edinburgh show. The first it was 60% of people hate their job. Then when I came to revive the show, it was 70% of people. And then recently I read that as many as 90% of us don't like our jobs.
Well, I'm glad I'm not one of those, I tell you.
I'm enjoying doing this, but 90%, I mean, you know, that's a lot of people.
Yes.
And not all for the same reason,
absolutely.
reason, but that's a lot of unhappy people. And considering that we spend a lot of time at work, that's really, really bad. And that then kind of impacts on the rest of our life as well. And that's one of the things that in an upcoming video, I want to talk about a concept I call seepage, where all that misery
sounds intriguing.
seeps into the rest of your life, and what can we do about it?
I have mud seeping into my boots.
Actually, yes. It's very muddy here today. Because this looks all lovely and green and bucolic, but actually we've tramped through miles of mud to get to this open
I think there's a spot of hyperbole there, young Mel. Miles of mud. It's like 400 yards.
Some yards of mud to get here. But it is rather lovely. I have no brief for Hadley Wood, but I've spent my first time here. Do come, and if you want to think about life, work and everything, do come to Hadley Wood. Oh, is that a clock going off there in the back?
A bell?
There was a bell going off, and you might hear the East Coast Main Line whizzing past us. There's beautiful cities like York and Leeds and Edinburgh. So before we go, I think we've come up with some really interesting things here today. So we'll sum up. So practical compassion. That's brilliant. Two brilliant words that really sum up the kindness thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's both kindness. But I think we shouldn't be afraid to use the word kindness, and I think I want to rehabilitate the word. So be a kind manager, be practically compassionate, and also to think about that emotional bank account. I love the idea of that. Because, potentially, I guess, as you come in as a manager, you're starting at zero deposits,
Yes.
And you can keep putting in, but it's very easy to take out, and it's so easy to go into the red.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel sometimes with that, once we're in the red, It's really hard to get back out again.
Don't I know it?
Yeah.
I need to buy some shares in happy companies.
Happy companies. If you run a happy company.
What's your TQ?
Yes, toxic or HQ or what was the other one?
Post office queue, whatever.
Practical compassion, the emotional bank account. Just be bloody nice. I mean, that seems like an obvious thing, but by getting the job done, there's simple things that I think we can all do. I'm sure we'll come back to Chris again because he's been fascinating. We've learned lots of things already in this short video. We've now got to tramp through the mud to get back, get out of here, or just come and visit us. We may be trapped for hours. And but thank you very much.
Thank you, Mel. You've been very kind.
I have.
You've been living the teaching here.
I am
in
living
this drizzle.
in this drizzle.
Kind in the drizzle. Kind of kind. Yes.
Thank you. All the details underneath somewhere or up there, depending on where you're watching this video on LinkedIn or YouTube. Bob me a message. Gosh, I just used a workplace jargon phrase. Bob me a message. Sorry.
I've never even heard it before.
Yeah, people are always bobbing.
I'm of another generation.
People are always bobbing in the office. But
and,
send me a message. And if you'd like some training, also send me a message with me. You've got him. There's all kinds. Yeah. So thank you very much on this miserable Wednesday. No, it's lovely in Hadley Wood, and I'll be back again with you soon. Don't forget, be practically compassionate.